If I could get you to take your seats, that would be great. We will get started right on time. My name is Robert Wittenstein, and it is my honor and privilege to introduce our guest speakers this afternoon, and I will sort of be MC when we get to the question and answer period. I've taken the bios of our two speakers and I have condensed them dramatically so that we can hear from them instead of about them. So with that, I'll introduce Representative Esther Panich first. She was born, raised, and educated in Miami, Florida. She attended the University of Miami, where she received both her Bachelor of Science degree and her Juris Doctor degree, graduating cum laude from law school. In 1997, Esther was hired as an assistant public defender in Miami-Dade County, handling cases from misdemeanors to murders. In 2004, Esther moved with her husband and 3 children to Georgia. She took and passed the Georgia bar and joined George Fox of our congregation, learning estate planning. Realizing she missed the courtroom, she joined the Fulton Conflict Defender's Office and then opened a private firm in Atlanta representing criminal defendants in all state and federal courts. Esther and her husband Roger belong to Congregation B'nai Torah in Sandy Springs. Esther is proud and humbled to be the first woman and the first Jewish person to be elected to House District 51. In spring of 2023, Esther served her first term as a state representative in the Georgia legislature, where she co-sponsored House Bill 30, known as the Anti-Semitism Definition Bill. And we welcome you, Esther. Representative John Carson is also a co-sponsor of House Bill 30. John Carson was elected to the Georgia House of Representatives in October of 2011, so he is a veteran at this point. He represents the 46th House District, which includes Northeast Cobb County and Southeast Cherokee County. He's an Atlanta native. Representative Carson was raised in a family that encouraged conservative values, the importance of education, and an excellent work ethic. Representative Carson has a bachelor's degree in business administration in accounting from Georgia State University and an MBA from Kennesaw State University. Representative Carson is a CPA and is employed with the state tax incentives. He was previously employed by KPMG, by GE Capital, and by SunTrust, now Truist. John and his wife Beverly have been married since 2005 and have 2 children. Their family attends Johnson Ferry Baptist Church. Would you please join me in welcoming our distinguished guests?
Gamar Chatima Tova, Shana Tova. That means Happy New Year, and may they be sealed in the Book of Life.
Got it. I was wondering about that. Thank you.
I seem to be the Jewish whisperer for all my colleagues. But today we decided to do this. I'll speak for a few minutes, John will speak for a few minutes, and then we're happy to open it up to questions. So, how did I get here? I ran because there was going to be no Jewish representation. Mike Walensky had decided he wasn't going to run for re-election, and he was the only Jewish member of the Georgia Assembly. And so I was kind of recruited, and I said, nah, I'm living my best life. My 3 kids had just gone off to college. My practice was going really well. We had built a place in the mountains. You know, why do I need politics? And then it took 2 non-Jews, Josh McLaurin and Jen Jordan, who contacted me and told me that if I didn't run, there would be no Jewish representation in the Georgia Assembly. None. So they're not Jewish, but they got the guilt thing going real well. So I decided I would put my name in, and hopefully somebody else would put their name in, equally or better qualified, and I'm here. So you can see that my plan didn't really work. It was, once I became elected, I can't tell you how many people at the Capitol, there aren't that many Jewish lobbyists or staff, but each of them came up to me to say thank you for running. And so as hard as this journey is, and it is hard, it's hard to be in politics these days, especially when it's not your life's aspiration. I am rewarded every day by seeing people who appreciate what I'm doing, what we're doing, and it's because of that I can keep doing this. Because it's a hard job. You see the sausage get made. You see a lot of people who you think are on your side, and then when push comes to shove, they are not only not on your side, but they're actively against you. So it's fascinating to me. And how I got involved, I think people think I started with HB 30. I didn't. John Carson started HB 30 a few years ago. John came up to me at the beginning of session and said, hey, we didn't really know each other. Would you sign this bill? And I had heard about the bill. I had talked to people at the AJC, Dov Wilker. I had talked to the ADL. I knew what this bill was about. I knew I'd support the bill. And I was grateful that he asked me to co-sponsor it. That was my first bill that I ever signed in the legislature to be a co-sponsor of, and I couldn't be prouder. So why do we need this? Because we don't have a definition of anti-Semitism. I know Rabbi Spike, I got here towards the end of his sermon, so I heard a little bit, but I'm not sure how much he told you, but we need this because there's no definition of anti-Semitism. There's no definition that takes into the contemporary or the conventional anti-Semitism and the new anti-Semitism, which masks itself as anti-Zionism. There are other definitions you will hear about. It's called the Jerusalem definition or the Nexus definition. They are not the gold standard. The gold standard came from the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, IRA, that's what we call IRA, and that's the only one that takes into account the old tropes, like Jews start, pestilence and pandemics and plagues, and the new one, that Israel has no right to exist. They call us Nazis, they call Israel Nazis, and they take it way beyond what a normal criticism of any country would be. If your only problem with an ethno-state is with the Jewish one, it's likely you're an anti-Semite. If you have no problem with 22 Arab nations, plenty of Christian nations, but you have a problem with the Jewish one, it's a problem. And there are a lot of people down at the Capitol with a problem against Israel. People who don't understand what's going on, people who've kind of bought the same old settler colonial apartheid, the things we hear all the time, the things we see on social media, and they don't know enough to know where the community is and where the fringe are. So of course, we're Jews, we have people, many opinions, and some of them who are anti-Israel. And so they became very loud at the Capitol this year. They showed up every day. They made appointments with all the legislators, with the leadership. They didn't stop. And so some of my colleagues believed that the Jewish community was equally divided, when nothing could be further from the truth. The vast majority of the Jewish community in Georgia, not just Atlanta, but all of Georgia, supports the IRA definition as the only definition. It's a group of small but loud people who don't believe Israel has a right to exist at all, who have become very, very prominent at the Capitol. And we need everybody else's voices to show that we're not equally divided. We are overwhelmingly in favor of the IHRA definition. So that's what I hope everyone takes away from this, that they understand what the definition is, why we need it, and why the other definitions are just not good enough. And I can get into more detail if somebody wants to know, but the other definitions either support BDS, which is an effort to delegitimize the state of Israel. It's not a way to express that you want collaboration and cooperation. You want Israel to be gone. That's the end goal. So those definitions don't work. And when non-Jews try to tell the Jewish community what our shared lived experience is and has been, I have a problem with that. No one should be able to define what we have experienced aside from or without our cooperation and full endorsement. So if you happen to hear any other definition come up, you now know why it's bad. And I would drill down to the person who is offering the definition. What is your position on the establishment and the existence of Israel as a Jewish state? Ask him that. Most of the time it'll be, well, I don't really believe that Israel has a right to exist. And then you know who you're dealing with. So with that, John.
Okay, so why is the Baptist Republican here? First of all, I just want to say thank you for the invitation. This is an important subject, and what I've said to numerous groups, including one last week and 2 months ago, and various places that Esther and I have gone to speak, this is not just important to, I believe, the Jewish community, but it's important to all of Georgia. Because if a group is not stopped from their persecution of one group, they're going to, and they drive the Jewish people out, they're going to go to the next group. Then they're going to go to the next group. This is about bullies, and this is ultimately about sin. I've been serving for about 12 years. I grew up here in the North Atlanta suburbs in Tucker, if you know where that is. And my high school is Henderson High School. They made it a middle school. So I'm an Atlanta native. My mother my mother and father were married for 49 years. My mother had a profound impact on me. As Robert mentioned, I have a background more so in accounting and tax and so forth, and went to school here in the local area. One of the things that my mother impressed upon me is to absolutely love the Jewish people. To absolutely love the Jewish people. Exactly straight out of Genesis 12. In, I guess it was November of 2020, 2 years before Esther was elected, your mayor, or how many of you live in Sandy Springs? Okay, most people. So you know your mayor, Rusty Paul, he advocates for a few causes. He came to me at the end of the 2020 session. He asked me to carry some legislation in regard to BDS. You're well aware of what boycott, divestment sanctions are. And we eventually were able to get that passed to cut off a planted lawsuit, but really more to do the right thing and provide for a constitutional clarification on what is boycott, divestment, and sanctions against the state of Israel. And rather than go to a lot of details, what we did, passed the law, HB 383, I think it was, and it was held in good standing, and let's just say that Council on American Islamic Relations, they're not very friendly to me. Fast forward into February of 22, Governor Kemp signed the BDS bill protecting our relationship with Israel. Mike Walensky, with help from him and several others, we filed the first anti-Semitism bill here in Georgia. I think it was House Bill 1274. Went through the House, got caught up in the Senate, didn't make it by the end of session. We started again with House Bill 30 this year. One of my phone calls that Wednesday, the first week of session, was to Esther, and she didn't know who the number was, I'm sure. But I can't tell you what a fantastic bipartisan partner you are and have been. One more time, thank you. Thank you, dear. One of the best ways, just what Esther mentioned, one of the best ways to stop legislation is to have what you think is one side of legislation divided. And even though about 95% of the Jewish groups and 96% of the Jewish people support, I would say, the IRA definition, it's not a matter of the numbers, it's a matter of how loud each side is. And that's what we're dealing with right now. Last week, 2 weeks ago, I went on a tour of a Jewish school over in Dunwoody. My children go to schools in Cobb in Fulton County, and we drive up. Sometimes there's a gate, sometimes there's not. There's some security cameras. There's one security officer at one of my children's schools. When I went to this Jewish school in Dunwoody, there was armed guards at the front, security cameras just about everywhere. You had to check in, you had to check out. So much protocol. Why? Because it is necessary, because the Jewish people are under attack, like never before. And that's one of many reasons why I'm doing this. I firmly believe in Genesis 12 in protecting the Jewish people. My mother's 85 years old. She's not doing well. She has she's in assisted living in Middle Georgia. And she has two things. I don't know, Esther, if I've ever mentioned this to you. So you're probably holding on for dear life right now. But in addition to a cross, she has a Star of David beside it on the wall. She grew up Baptist, just like I am now. But in addition to that, when she was a little bit more coherent than she is now, she has dementia. She said to me, she said, "See that picture right there? And it's a landscape photo taken from Capernaum over the Sea of Galilee." And she said, "You see that, son?" I said, "Yeah, Mom, I do." That's where God's people are from. That's where God's people are from. I'm doing this because it is the right thing, it is the moral thing, and unless we take a stand right here, right now, against this kind of persecution, bullying, awful behavior, the Jewish people are not going to be the last group. It's going to be another group, and then another group, and another group. And that's why I take a stand. Esther's area, I forgot your house district number. It's
51, and we're
51.
sitting right in it right now.
I have more good old boy rednecks than I do Jewish constituents. My constituents are probably 1.5%, maybe 1.25% Jewish. It's not that many. I'm not doing this because I'm looking for all kinds of political success and favors and attributes and so forth. They've come for whatever reason. I got somebody fooled. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. And I make jokes occasionally, and I apologize that this is not the right place to make it, but what I say to people is if I was an Irish American living in Jerusalem, I'd want the Knesset and the spiritual leaders to protect me. And that's what I'm doing here for the Jewish people. Thank you for having me.
You guys ready for questions?
Yes.
Well, let me ask the first one, if I might. What is the status of the bill today? Where is it, and what are the next steps once the legislature convenes in January?
I can answer that, and Esther, you want to chime in. House Bill 30 is the IRA definition of anti-Semitism bill. It's only about 3 pages. It has passed the Georgia House with pretty overwhelming support, unanimous on my side. We still have some work to do on the Senate side, as you know. It's passed the Georgia House. It's gone to the Senate. It's sitting in Senate Judiciary Committee. It has not yet been, after 2 years, it is still not cleared the Senate for various reasons that Esther, I think, pointed out quite well. One is the other side from us ideologically, they lie. I don't know how else to sugarcoat it. They lie. They say this is an infringement on speech or what have you, and so they're just not accountable for the truth. And ultimately, I think Esther said it very well. They're just against the nation of Israel. I was offered a compromise early on. I didn't accept it, which basically said, we'll accept the IRA definition as long as you don't put in these 2 examples of the IRA definition. And both of the examples, Esther remembers this, one group was saying that don't include these 2 examples that codify the right of Israel to exist. And some other people are talking about other definitions that are watered down, that are not in sync with other states, the U.S. Government, other nations, and so forth. What I've told various groups, such as this, is that if we don't get the IRA definition, which is the international gold standard for anti-Semitism, then we're going to come back in 25, and then we're going to come back in 26, and then we're going to come back in 27. It doesn't matter to me how long, but I'm not going to accept anything less than what is the gold standard and has been upheld in court.
Right, and there are ways to compromise in politics. We have to find compromise in a lot of things. This definition is not the compromise. It cannot be compromised. We actually had in the House and the Senate Judiciary Committee, Senator Ed Setzler, who decided on his own without community support or even knowledge to redefine the IRA definition, which right now says it's a certain perception of Jews, and then it goes on and it has about 11 examples, a few of them mention Israel, and he decided to say, oh no, it should be a negative perception of Jews. He said this in the hearing. He had printed it out. He was handing it out, so he obviously thought about this prior to the hearing, didn't mention it to anybody, and then I'm sitting there in the hearing looking at this, and off the top, without thinking, a negative perception of Jews is not the only thing that gets Jews killed. Positive perceptions of Jews as it relates to power, as it relates to money. People would think, oh, these are compliments. They're not compliments, but under his definition, you would not be characterized, it would not be anti-Semitism if there's a violent act against property, or there's no violence against property, but if you deface property or you harm a person using things like Zionist pig, that would not be covered under current law. It would be covered under IRA. So he just on his own, and this is what we have to watch out for, people who decide they know better without talking to the community as a whole and trying to shove it down, try to shove the legislation down, and as a method of compromise, which it's not. So again, I'm a pragmatist, I'm a Democrat, I'm a pragmatist. Clearly, I'm happy to go across the aisle and work towards things that are better for Georgians, no matter what side of the aisle you're on. But this is not one to compromise on. This specific definition is the gold standard. It's the one adopted by 1,100 entities, including countries, including our own country. Under Obama in the State Department and the Department of State and Department of Education, under Trump and Biden. If they can all agree to this definition, there's no reason the Georgia legislature can.
And I just wanted to say one more thing, Robert, in regard to other definitions of anti-Semitism. First of all, why do we need it? What I tell my more Protestant, Catholic brethren is we need it because it's not simply about skin color. It's not simply about the country you're from. The Jewish faith is multifaceted. It's about bloodline. It's about country. It's about spiritual belief. It's about religion. It's about so many different things. It's not just one. I'm a Caucasian individual, or I'm this. It's not just that. The second thing is some people will say, well, we have a hate crimes law. Why do we need this? Discrimination is not, quote unquote, a hate crime in a violent sense. But unless we pass this, we can't protect Jewish people from illegal discrimination, or we can't identify anti-Semitism and discrimination with regard to lending decisions or housing decisions and so forth. And third, what I would also say is that some people have floated what Esther mentioned as far as a Jerusalem declaration of anti-Semitism. That was actually floated by some of our House colleagues, if you remember. What is interesting about that is it completely leaves out the right of Israel to exist. If you're walking down the street and you appear to be a Jewish person based on whatever characteristics, and someone comes up and just commits assault to you, just punches you or what have you, they could, under the IRA definition, they could very well be potentially guilty of anti-Semitism, anti-Semitic behavior. If we pass the Jerusalem Declaration on anti-Semitism, I would say, no, you know what? I just see a Jewish person. I'm not punching them because they're Jewish. I'm punching them because I'm speaking out against the nation of Israel. And that is not not anti-Semitism under that definition. As horrific as that sounds, that's what kind of evil that we're dealing with.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we have a mic set up here, so rather than raise your hand, I see some hands raised, we love that. I would ask you to come to the mic. I would also suggest that there will be a bunch of questions. If you can keep your questions short and in the form of a question, then they'll have an opportunity to provide answers. And with that, go ahead.
I have two questions. What other states have an anti-Semitism rule or a law in place? Is it an amendment to the Constitution or not? And then my second question is, how can we help?
So IRA has been adopted by many states in the country. I brought notes, but I didn't bring my list of IRA of where it's been established. Missouri just did it last week. There are 30 states, thank you, 30 states that it's been passed in, Democrat and Republican led. So it's not a partisan issue. It shouldn't be a partisan issue. And we're trying to keep Georgia from being one of the last. We were one of the 3 last to get a hate crime statute. And it was only because Ahmaud Arbery was killed in the street and embarrassed the legislature that there was no hate crimes law and that Georgia was an outlier when it came to the country, who realized there is something significant about attacking someone because of who they are or how they were born, and not, well, I didn't like this person, not that there's ever a justification. But people understand why hate crimes are necessary, why the definitions in them are necessary. And Georgia is going to end up being an outlier if we don't adopt it. If I can add one more thing to John's point before I move on, because I don't want to forget this. Our college kids are seeing this firsthand. They are on the front lines of what is going on. They are being excluded from clubs. They are being told they can't be in progressive circles if they're not anti-Israel. It is unbelievable what is happening on college campuses. Larry Cernovich is here. He is now head of Hillel, Rabbi Cernovich. And he can tell you more outside of this how these kids are being affected. And some of these kids don't have the level of education or the level of confidence that we as adults develop over time. And they're really being beaten down. I mean, thank God for places like Hillel and Chabad and the other organizations on campus that give them some support. But they are seeing this. We saw what's going on at Penn right now with the Palestine Rights, WRITES, which invited Roger Waters because they're not anti-Semitic. I mean, it's just unbelievable to me, the logic that you have to go through to make this make sense. So please talk, if you're not sure how this is manifesting, talk to your kids or your grandkids who are in college. They will tell you exactly what is happening and how, what help they could have or they need from you.
So
Thank
Esther,
you.
let me rephrase her second question, which was, what can we do to help, right? How can we be effective in helping you all get this passed?
Your first question was, what kind of change needs to take place? It just needs to be put into code, into the Georgia code, such that prosecutors can determine whether or not, beyond a reasonable doubt, there was anti-Semitic behavior. What is anti-Semitic? That's why we need the definition. Second question, what can you do to help? Make your voice known. Not loud, not ugly, make it known. I will tell you that one of the reasons, without getting into too much detail, is one of the reasons why the bill did not pass this past year in March is because certain groups were a little too loud. You want to ask, you want to ask, but be direct and non-confrontational and forth, because the people that are voting on this, they don't know what you go through on a daily basis, but they do know if they feel insulted or disrespected or even threatened. Make your voice known, but not too loud that it's a turnoff.
Hi. I'm just gonna
Where did you come from?
Shazam. So everyone's getting an email tomorrow, okay? And in it, we've outlined step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and part of that is that the AJC, the American Jewish Committee, is quarterbacking our responses. So there are some representatives who should be lobbied with particular language, and they're going to give us the script for that, and others that we're supposed to avoid. So they know the touch points for each one. You opt in by clicking on a particular link that's going to be sent to you tomorrow, and they will tell you, get in touch with this person and say this, or avoid this person, right? To the point up here. All right, thank you. Thanks, guys.
Does that answer your question? Okay.
Thank you for your performance during the last session of the legislature. I was there multiple times. My question is, to what degree is there support among senior Republican leadership, like Lieutenant Governor Jones, State Majority Leader Kennedy, Senator Gooch, among the others? I know that it's in a different assembly, but share with us what you think the prevailing thinking is.
Can I split that question into 3 parts? Well, I volunteered to do it. In the Georgia House, the leadership, all Republican, voted unanimously in favor of the IRA definition, period. In the Senate, they obviously ran into some issues in the Senate Judiciary Committee, and as a result, I do need to give credit to Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones. He had another bill pulled and put the IRA language on it and move it forward in another committee because it was that important to get it done and not wait another year to protect the Jewish people. That was also done, with my knowledge, to the request of Senate Pro Tem John Kennedy from Macon, as well as the Majority Leader Steve Gooch from Dahlonega. I think it's Dahlonega where he's from. In addition, we've had conversations with Governor Kemp's office, and I can't go into that in detail, but I think it's well known and documented his support of the Jewish people.
I will say, if the governor wants this to be passed, he will put it on his floor leaders. He has a way of making legislation that he really supports get through. So I would say, if you know the governor or you know the lieutenant governor, let them know. Let them know that this means a lot to you. and that this is important for your whole community. So we need all hands on deck. This is not a partisan issue. We really need whatever help we can get. So if you have special relationships with legislators, make sure that they are supporting this bill. Support those who support the bill. But there are plenty of people, and I carry the screenshot of the vote in the House on my phone. So I know who didn't vote for the bill, who walked on the bill, and whatever the reasons they gave. So, no, if you live in parts of Decatur, your rep does not support this bill, Becky Evans. But Mary Margaret does support this bill. So there are plenty of good and not as supportive in the legislature. So please check. I'm happy to send it to the rabbi so he sees, so it's clear who voted how, and talk to them. I will say, after the vote, one of my colleagues voted no, and then his district was flyered. And he attended one of the church events that was held, thank God, by the church, and we didn't have to plan our own response. And he spoke, and I told him this is going to be a pro-IRA crowd, just so you know. And he came and spoke, and then at the end he came to me and said he would switch his vote if he had the opportunity to vote. So I think people seeing the reaction or seeing what's actually happening is changing minds. I had another rep who also voted no, who said to me at a conference, well, why can't we just throw the people who flyer in jail? I said, do you know that that's much more restrictive than the IRA definition, just to be clear? You know, what you're advising is maybe against the First Amendment. IRA's not. And I sent him an article about that, and hopefully he'll take it to heart now that they see the actual consequence of unpunished hateful behavior. So I'm not saying flyers should or should not be legal. I know I'm working with the ADL in some municipalities to try to fix that. So it is, but it's under a different statute. But it's, I forgot my train of thought.
I just wanted to say real quick.
It's lack of food and water.
The flyers that
Thank you.
Esther mentioned were, and not just the flyers, but the activists, the hateful activists that appeared at the Shabbat of Cobb, not far from, across the street from my church, Johnson's Ferry. That activity used to happen in Florida, where this person that organizes those activities, he used to do this. The Florida government, the General Assembly, and their governor recently signed the IRA definition into law, and guess what? That anti-Semitic behavior stopped. Why? They still have the First Amendment right of free speech, but they don't want to be guilty of anti-Semitic actions, and therefore they were to drive out that hateful behavior out of Florida.
Which is why it's now in Georgia. That's one real explanation that we are hearing, that the law in Florida changed, and a lot of them don't want to test it, and so they're going where it's friendlier to them, and that happens to be us.
I was at the Capitol many times last
Yes,
session.
you were, Jeff.
Well,
Thank you.
I want to thank you so much for all your hard work, Representative Panish and Carson. And to piggyback on what Rabbi Spike said, the American Jewish Committee is spearheading the efforts to meet with the leaders of the Judiciary and Rules Committee. I don't think they want people doing a lot on their own, reaching out, because it was not only loud but overkill last time. So I think we need to take our cue from the American Jewish Committee, aside from what Rabbi Spike said about how to reach out. But how is that working? I mean, I've been getting some emails. We've been meeting with some of the Judiciary and Rules Committee, which are the most important members. What's the status of that? As we're only 3 months away or so from the session.
3 months away.
You want to answer?
Well, I guess we'll know when they put the bill up in the Senate and vote on it. Until they do that, we don't really know what impact we're having. We hope we're having a positive impact. We are doing the hard work. We are meeting with people who wouldn't necessarily agree with us, and slowly some minds are changing. So I'm optimistic that this work is meaningful and will get us somewhere. So when I said if you know somebody, if your rep, the governor, if you have a relationship with them, just don't, be kind, be nice, say, look, I really want to discuss how this impacts my community and why it's important for you to care about this. And that's helpful. Please don't go rogue. Check in with me or John or the AJC. We will know what's going on, but it doesn't help if somebody goes on their, obviously on their own, who doesn't have a relationship with people and starts harassing them. That's obviously bad.
Thanks again. God
Thanks,
bless you
yeah.
both. Thank you.
So I have, driven past the neo-Nazi rallies, and I've got friends who are at schools with swastikas vandalized on walls, and this is a very real part of our community. And I'm wondering about the immediate and also the long-term effects of HB 30. Will we notice, if it gets passed in 3 months, will we notice a change now? Like, how will law enforcement change? How will the judicial system change? What immediate and long-term effects are we going to see from the bill passing?
Well, you're the lawyer.
I can take it. Yeah, I'm the lawyer. So immediately, it'll be more of a deterrent because Georgia has taken a stand and said that this is the definition we're sticking with. And so anti-Zionism in its extreme form, in its violent form, will not be tolerated. So you can't mask your anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism. So even if this bill wouldn't criminalize a flyer on a doorstep, it will deter them because they know that the state has stepped up, just like Florida, the state has stepped up. So when people know that law enforcement cares, and to be fair, law enforcement has been phenomenal during this whole thing. So they have taken the reports, they have acknowledged the problem. We know who's doing this. It's not a who does it, who's doing this, we know. Just that we don't have the capacity at this point to stop them until they do something worse, which we don't want. So the real way we're ever going to know how this impacts is in a God forbid setting. God forbid somebody's property is defaced, or really, God forbid, somebody is harmed. A Jewish person is harmed, and because they're Jewish. And so that's what this bill ultimately does. That's the long-term impact. Prosecutors are aware of this. I have been contacted by federal prosecutors with hate crime statute, they have a federal hate crime statute. And I've talked to state prosecutors they know of the definition. The challenge is that prosecutors in smaller counties where there aren't just that many Jews. And so they wouldn't necessarily get to that definition. But I've been meeting with prosecutors. I'm a defense attorney, so I know these people from working with them, against them, for the last 20-something years, or I've been here about 19 years, so 19 years. And they are all willing to help. They just need some guidance, and this legislation gives it to them.
I would say, I'm not an attorney and definitely not a prosecutor. What I would say, if things went the way I think Esther and I want them to go, we would have some sort of a Senate vote in January, reconcile differences between the House and the Senate, and get a final bill sent to the governor in February, and hopefully he signs it late February, early March. The bill, as currently drafted, if I believe it's correct, it would go into effect July 1st of 2024. What I would expect is that you would see even less anti-Semitic activity starting July 1st. Why? Not because it still protects the freedom of speech. It does not affect constitutional rights there. What it does, it sets a baseline definition in regard to if you do this and then commit some other criminal act, then we have a baseline and a definition to determine whether or not that act was anti-Semitic. And then we're going to see, I hope, we're going to see very similar to what happened in Florida, where this kind of activity stopped. Not because they still obviously have a freedom of speech, just like we do, okay, in the same country. However, if they commit these certain acts, they could be very well guilty of anti-Semitism, whereas Georgia, it's silent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you for your tenacity and your courage. Is it possible that in the Georgia Senate, one of the problems expressed in their rationale and or their excuse is Netanyahu and his policies, which, while there are really good Jews and Israelis who support him in Israel, in the United States, to a number of Jewish people, he's toxic, okay? And he's a great target to use to keep an anti-Semitic bill from passing. Is there any way to really educate these people in the Senate that Netanyahu does not equal Israel? Netanyahu does not equal Judaism. Some Jewish people, and are there any polls, particularly U.S. polls, that I would think would show Netanyahu to be extremely highly unpopular, that can be shown to members of the Senate to sell them on the idea that a vote for this bill is not a vote for Netanyahu?
I will tell you, thank you for your question, and it makes sense that people would have talked about it, although the judicial reform was really not moving while we were in session. It's more recent. But I never heard anybody talk about a specific policy of Israel or a specific leader in Israel. It was the idea that Israel exists. And so it's way beyond. I don't think anyone thinks that, well, I don't know what they think, but I hope that they don't think that it's about a specific leader in Israel at any time. This is more basic. If you ask, they will say they don't believe Israel has the right to exist.
If I may, think about who the Georgia senators are. Almost all of them have heard of Netanyahu. Okay, I'll get absolutely.
Almost all of them what?
Sorry, almost all the Georgia senators have heard of Benjamin Netanyahu, okay? But you got to think about who they are and where they come from. They're a farmer from Moultrie, a farmer from Waycross, an attorney from Athens, an engineer from North Atlanta, an auctioneer from North Georgia, an insurance agent from West Georgia. And when they hear, okay, and when they hear a couple of Jewish groups say, oh no, this is terrible, this is awful, don't do this, and so forth, versus they're not hearing from the vast majority of Jewish people and Jewish groups that this is good, that we need this, it's easy to put that aside and say, you know what, I don't have many Jewish people in my district just based on numbers. Let's push this off and think about it some more. So I applaud your thought in regard to that next step of Israel government, leaders, maybe even the Knesset, but that's not how, I don't believe that's how a Georgia senator is thinking about this. They're looking at the politics of it and against it. And they don't know deep down the struggles and the persecution and the violence that your community is besieged upon.
A quick
Okay?
follow-up.
And so they don't understand that, and when they see a group divided, it's easier to do nothing.
Just a quick follow-up then. Are there Jewish donors to the Republican Party in the state of Georgia that can have some discussions with some of the senators that are on the fence?
The answer is yes, and those have been ongoing, and they're increasing in frequency.
And yes, just so you know, again, this is an all hands on deck. I have asked anybody who has contacts with people we need to meet. Everybody has been willing to call. No matter politically where we are, everybody has been helpful. So the Republican Jewish groups had definitely stepped in to help.
Robert, I just wanted to say real quick that I guess we're done with Q&A pretty much, right?
We are wrapping up.
I just, Look, Esther and I are of different parties, but we're united on this, and we're not going to stop. We're not going to sacrifice for good enough, because good enough is not good enough. If you don't hear anything else out of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Fish Wrap, or all the other social media stuff, I would say this, okay? And I apologize if you've not heard it from us previously, but you are loved. You are supported. As a Protestant, I can't even begin to imagine how much persecution your community has been through and is currently going through. But we're not going to stop with good enough until we get the gold definition to protect your community forever.
John, Esther, thank you both so much for all of your work and for being with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.